I would like to thank one of my subscribers, I'll just call him JG, for sending this article from the Telegraph. And it's going to go over again the population on this world and how dramatically it's changing. And I will leave the link to this article in the description box, and it's dated September 18th, 2018. Diffusing the demographic time bomb, the world's population challenges in 13 charts. Ladies and gentlemen, if the population was not a big issue, we would not see these articles coming out so frequently now, because it is a big deal. Period. Population trends have always shaped the world, sparking terrible conflicts, but also huge progress. Today, demographicers believe that we are at a turning point. Birth rates in much of developed worlds are failing. Okay? Failing. I know they have falling there, but I'm saying failing fast, leaving many countries with too few young workers to support rapidly aging populations. On the other hand, Africa is experiencing a population boom of an unprecedented scale, with numbers set to nearly double to 2.5 billion by 2050. You know, ladies and gentlemen, Africa has the largest population on Earth, and there's probably another billion Black people outside of Africa living across the world in different countries. That's just my estimate. And, you know, all of these other populations, they're pretty much screwed. And we know China messed themselves up with that one child rule. So they screwed themselves up for nearly 20 years. Now they're trying to play catch up, and they're not going to be able to catch themselves up because it's not enough women now. They done aborted so many female babies. It's not enough women to go around for each man in the country. If managed well, these trends could allow the world to reap a population dividend and fuel decades of improved living standards and sustained economic growth. But if handled badly, growing discontent and uncontrolled migration and conflict are likely. No, see, if there is conflict, it's from the ones that are dying out and not growing at all. They're going to be the ones causing the conflict. That's where it's going to come from. We've put together 13 charts that show how the world's population is changing and how governments can influence those changes for good. 1, there are more people in the world than ever before. The world is currently home to 7.6 billion people, a figure that has tripled since the middle of the last century. With roughly 83 million people, the number of people living in Germany being added to the world's population every year, the global population is set to reach 9.8 billion by 2050. And you can see right here the global population. You see it 1950s, 2000, 2050, and 2100. The global population in 2100 will be more than 4 times the population in 1950. Number 2, but population growth is far from even. It is the poorest parts of the world where populations are growing fastest. More than half the additional 2.2 billion people that will be added to the world's population by 2050 will be in Africa. First of all, Africa is the richest continent on earth. And the fact that all of these other nations have convinced everybody that Africa is poor and they don't have nothing and the people are poor. No, see, it is the outsiders are the reason for those people being poor. Africa is the richest continent on the face of the earth. And it is time for us to change this narrative that these Western nations and places like China has been putting out about Africa for decades. Africa is not poor, it is rich. That's why their heads are over there digging up all the resources every single year and putting their armies over there and putting all kinds of companies over there, and because they know where the resources is. All of these countries that are trying to call Africa poor, they're poor. They are poor. Their countries have no resources. And most of them within its poorest regions. No, the West is poor. Africa is a wealthy continent. It has all of the resources. It is not just absolute numbers that are important, but also the age profile of different regions. For example, 6% of Africa's population today is under the age of 25. Contrast that with Europe, where just 27% of the population are under 25. That's because most of their population in Europe are elderly. The biggest population in America are elders, not a young population, which is really a bad thing. It's a bad thing because you won't have the labor force that you used to have. And that's going to make a horrible economic impact, being that you don't have the number of young people that you had decades before. The challenge is to create jobs and growth in regions with younger populations while managing the flow of skilled immigrants to countries with aging populations. That will require significant investments in social services such as health and education, as well as infrastructure and business. And that's the truth. That is the truth. Aging populations, that's not where you want to invest your money. It's best to invest it in a younger population because they're going to be the ones making the big economic impact. 3, there are 3 big drivers of population change. A, birth rates, which I have been talking about for some time. More and more countries, especially wealthy ones, now have birth rates lower than 2.1. How are you wealthy and you are sinking as far as population is concerned? How are you wealthy? And how is it that all of these nations that have the alleged high IQs are the ones that are sinking in population? You know what, ladies and gentlemen? They are cursed. They are cursed. See, they were the ones running around here talking about, we need to do something about the population on Earth. We need to do something. It's too many people, too many people. And guess who's getting thinned out now? Guess who's getting thinned out? This is why they say, be careful of what you wish for. See, you wanted to thin out all of those that didn't look like you. But see, it didn't pan out that way, did it? So all of these nations that were bitching about the population, they're the ones being thinned out. Isn't that ironic, ladies and gentlemen? Don't you see the irony in that? All right. The number of children per woman needed to replace a population or keep it stable. But while fertility rates have fallen in nearly all regions of the world, including Africa, that's not true. Africa is growing. No, it's not including Africa. I can tell you, whoever wrote this article, they're from the West, ladies and gentlemen. Africa is not declining in population. Africa is booming in population. They are lying. There are still huge variations. The average number of children born to each woman. All right, so you can see fertility rates in sub-Saharan Africa have only fallen 25% since 1960. Okay, so now you see all of the countries here, and your Western nations are the ones that are falling fast. You know, I don't even worry about them talking all that BS about, well, we're going to still have the wealth. You probably won't even be alive to have the wealth at the rate that you're all dying out. You got to be living in order to have the wealth, not dead. Take wealthy South Korea, for example, where the birth rate is just 1.2. Oh, shoot, they're going to be out of here in no time. Contrast with Niger, one of the poorest African countries in the world, but they got resources, don't they? I bet you they have more resources than South Korea, where each woman still has an average of 7.2 children. So for every one woman, they have 7.2 children. In South Korea, for every one woman, they have 1.2 children. But these folks are claiming to be smarter and have higher IQs, ladies and gentlemen. It is pretty fucked up to have a high IQ and doing so poorly birth-wise. While in Singapore, the government is now subsidizing speed dating as part of a package of measures to try and get birth rates up. In Africa, much wider provisions of contraceptives will be key to bringing birth rates down to more sustainable levels. Don't take that stuff. Africans, don't take it. When they come to you with all this contraceptive stuff, don't take it. Y'all keep right on having babies, because you can't have a next generation without babies. Don't listen to these people. See, this is how the West messed their self up with all these different gadgets for birth control. This is how they screwed themselves up. Abortion and all that stuff. Don't take that mess. Whatever the West brings you for contraceptives, don't touch it. Tell them to take it. Contraception does not just allow families to control the total number of children they have, but allows them to be better planned. Don't listen to the West. They've messed themselves up. Don't take advice from a nation that have declining birth rates, Africa. Those are not the kind of people you want to take advice from. Africa, contraceptive, 35.7% of the women between the age of 15 and 49 as of 2017 are on contraceptives. Oceania, 57.7%, Asian, 66.6%, Europe, 69.3%, North America, 73.5%, and Latin America, 74.3%. So all of the ones that are taking the highest amount of birth control are doing the poorest in birth rate. Don't take their advice. When they come with the contraceptives, walk away, Africa. Don't take advice from people that have poor birth rates. Fewer people are dying. It may seem paradoxical that the world's birth rate is falling while its population increases. But that's because the number of women of childbearing age keeps going up as life expectancy continues to rise. Death rates across the globe have dramatically reduced in the last 5 decades as access to sanitation, nutrition, and healthcare has improved. In 1970, 11.9 people per 1,000 died globally, while in 2016, that figure was just 7.8. Improvements have been most significant in sub-Saharan Africa, where the number of people dying per 1,000 has dropped by almost 40% since 2000. So by 40%, they have dropped. So good for them. They're doing better. There's improvement. Plus, they have a booming birth rate, and they're doing better as far as people dying. Good for them. Good for them. The death rate in regions is now lower than in Europe and Central Asia, where countries like Bulgaria, Ukraine, and Latvia saw more than 14.5 people per 1,000 die in 2016. Okay. So the crude death rate per 1,000 people. So Africa is doing better than the nations that claim they are rich and have high IQs, y'all. Imagine that. I tell you what, if that's what a high IQ look like, I don't ever want one. Populations are on the move, as well as variations between countries. Population growth, it's uneven within borders too. An important ongoing trend is the mass movement of people out of rural areas into countries. In 1950, the world was almost rural. Today, it's mostly urban. By 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will live in cities, with the boom concentrated in vast new cities being created in India, China, and Nigeria. The United Nations says that many countries will struggle to meet the needs of their growing urban population when it comes to housing, transportation, energy, jobs, and basic services, which as education and healthcare, unless governments step up to the challenge now. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Don't let them talk this scare tactic stuff to you. Oh, well, you better do something now. You know, they do that all the time. Don't even pay attention to it. You'll be fine. All right. So, portion of people living in urban areas, more developed countries, it's the highest global average, and less developed countries. So it's really up globally when you look at this chart. There's more people moving and living in those urban areas. Of course, people move across borders too, particularly in search of work. Nearly 2/3, 74% of migrants in 2017 were of working age, and the majority, almost 2/3, moved from low to higher income countries. The impact of migration on population trends is hard to overstate. In many areas of the world, as Woolley explained, population growth or reverses in population decline without immigrants. For example, Europe have shrunk between 2000 and 2015. Last year, the UN estimated that 258 million people moved abroad, a drastic rise from the 173 million in 2000. The highest net migration was in North America, where 53 million people moved in, contributing to 42% of the country's population growth. Major international immigration routes. So it shows you a lot of people, which we already know that comes from Latin America and Caribbean, are coming to America, and also Asian nations. All right. And you can see a lot of Africans going into Europe and Asians going into Europe. 4. So, what does this all mean? Wealthier countries will have fewer workers to support an increasingly elderly population. Globally, the population age is 60 or over, is growing faster than all younger age groups. So, you got this old population and you have a much smaller young population, which is not good. That imbalance is not good at all because, like I said, on an economic level, it's going to make a huge difference. All the money that you're seeing in your economy now, you are not going to see that when this next generation come along and jobs go unfilled because it is just not enough youth in your country. In the richest countries, the number of elderly people each working age person has to support has risen from 16 in 1970 to 27 today. As a result, healthcare spending will continue to rocket. Research by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development shows that the majority of health and social care spending in higher income countries already goes on those age over 65. In the Netherlands, for example, those over 65 accounted for 16% of the population in 2011, but 40% of health cost. Number of elderly per 100 people age 15 to 64. And as you can see, country income, high income countries, look, oh my God, look how big the elderly population is. Wow. Ooh, when they die out, it ain't gonna be hardly none of certain groups left. The developing world will see a boom in young people. In almost all parts of the world, the proportion of young people without jobs has grown. The countries as far away as South Africa and Spain struggling to find meaningful opportunities for the young, while swelling numbers of young people have made finding a job harder, economic woes and mismatch between the skill young people and jobs available. Yeah, I can see that is going to be kind of lopsided. They do that to a lot of our young people now. They'll finish college and then they can't get jobs in their professions. So I can imagine it's going to get even worse as time goes on, as far as that's concerned. That's why, we should really be gearing our young towards entrepreneurship, starting their own businesses and not relying on the same old system, and put money in your pocket. Stop making some of these other people that really truly don't deserve it, stop making them rich. Make yourself rich. While swelling numbers of young people have made finding a job harder, economic woes and mismatch between the skills young people have and the jobs available have exacerbated this. The Middle East and North Africa currently have the highest youth unemployment rates in the world. But over the next 30 years, it will be sub Saharan Africa that is hit hardest, is its population continues to boom. While some worry that the high numbers of young people, are a ticking time bomb, With the right education, healthcare, and employment opportunity, increasing numbers of young people could drive a new global economic boom. No, what these young people got to do is start their own businesses. If they start pushing that over working for people, they'll actually be okay. You know, they will have a big economy, start a business where it is something that the public depends on having. Start those business up and you'll have your customer base right there in your country, your booming nation, your booming continent. That's what they need to do. And no more going out here and looking for employment and, and let these people rip you off in these per hour jobs. Yeah, you're going to need a labor force like that, but many of these young people need to take care of, just take advantage of the booming birth rate that's going on in certain areas and let those people start up their own businesses. Tackling poverty will become even harder. With more people on the planet, bringing down the number of people in poverty, particularly in the fastest growing places, become harder. It don't have to become harder. It don't have to become harder, y'all. If you use your brains now, it don't have to become harder at all. The challenge is, again, most stark in Africa, although the rate of poverty in sub-Saharan Africa has fallen from 54% in 1990 to 41% in 2013. So it's less people in poverty. Poverty, of course, is certainly there, but less people are in poverty in Africa than in the 1990s. A growing population means the absolute number of Africans living in poverty has actually risen from 278 million people to 390 million. You know what you do? Get all those foreigners out of Africa that are raping your land, throw them all out, and then Africa, you turn around and sell your resources worldwide. That's how you break the cycle. No more freeloading off of Africa, because that's all they're doing. All of these Western nations are freeloaders. So no more freeloading. If you want any resource out here, you pay for it. Period. Since you claim you're a wealthy nation, if you're a wealthy nation, then you need to pay for stuff. And with Africa's population set to double by 2050, even if we have the proportion of people living in poverty between now and then, the absolute number of poor people will stay the same. They will also be highly concentrated in a few countries, with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria set to be home to 40%. Wow, 40%? Of those living in extreme poverty by 2050. Okay, population poverty, Trust me, y'all, don't pay attention to this. Just look at it with a grain of salt. Somebody from the West definitely wrote this. They definitely wrote it. Being that younger people won't be plentiful in the Western nations, they're going to see a lot of poverty too. They are. Okay, if you don't have the young people to bring the money circulating through the economy, you're going to be looking at a lot of poverty too. But, they're going to conveniently leave that out of this article. How should governments prepare? Developing countries must address family planning and create employment opportunities for the young. For low-income countries, family planning is key to tackling rapid growth. Nope, don't take it, y'all. Don't take it. I'm going to say this again. When it comes down to your population growth in Africa, do not take advice from Western nations that are not reproducing. They can't tell you nothing, and they already messed up their populations. Okay? Don't take advice from any Western nation when it comes down to your population in Africa. Just because they can't reproduce, don't let them screw things up for you in Africa. Okay. Women having children later in life further reduces the population, even when families continue to have lots of children. If a woman is 20 when she has her first child, and this continues with her children, then there will be three generations with a 60-year period, within a 60-year period. A woman by 30 there will be two. Yeah, a lot of them are claiming they're putting off giving birth. Ladies and gentlemen, they can't have babies. They can't have babies. They're having trouble getting pregnant. Projected population in sub-Saharan Africa, if every woman had the number of children she wanted within the next 5 years, Africa's population would change by 30% by 2100. If there's a shift away from young mothers, okay, so sub-Saharan Africa, they are projecting is going to just continue to go up, and good for them. Don't let the Western nations mess up your birth rate. But there's also huge potential for low-income countries to harness their young population and create massive economic growth, as China and India have done to dramatic effect over the last few decades. If countries invest in the health and education of young people, the Bill and Melinda Foundation, oh boy, estimates that economies in sub-Saharan Africa could grow by as much as 90% by 2050. GDP per capita in sub-Saharan Africa. So you look like everything's going up for Africa. B, wealthy countries will need to replenish their population. That's easier said than done. We know that they have resorted to paying women in Western nations to give birth, and they simply still, with money on the table, they still can't do it. Okay. So it is a combination of a lot of things, but in many instances, these women just simply can't get pregnant like they used to. They used to be able to get pregnant. Now, getting pregnant is a huge challenge for them, and they just can't do it. And they're not going to admit this, of course. They're going to talk about immigration and encouraging immigrants to come. And, that is just a band-aid on the problem. You still need a youth population for the next generation. And if you don't have that, that's going to be a major, major problem. It's going to be a big problem. And you see what they're doing now. They're running the Mexicans out of here, and a lot of these people from South American countries. They're running the Haitians out. They're trying to get all of these people out of here right now. So, being said, how is immigration really going to be that big of an impact? Immigrants from Europe is not going to help because they can't even reproduce over in the lands they live in. They're not going to be able to reproduce over here in America any better than they're reproducing now. Plain and simple. So female employment and fertility rates, all of these nations are doing poorly. Every single one you see on this chart, they are doing poorly as far as reproducing themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. I think it's a combination of genetics, and people are, and not to mention, the wealthy nations do not exactly have the best health care. I know they think they do, but they really don't. They really don't. They don't have the best health care. And I think the diets that people are living by in Western nations are poor. When you look at what's out here. It's way too many fast food junk restaurants. People in the West eat too much damn junk. That's part of the problem. And people in the West also tend to abuse drugs and alcohol more than people in sub-Saharan Africa. People in the West have a lot of bad, nasty habits um, that don't help. You eat all them GMO foods. They love GMO, you know, and look at everything that's engineered on the market: seedless watermelon, seedless grapes, seedless oranges. They want everything GMO out here in their stores. And like I said, they put all these preservatives and empty fillers in foods, and it's just not a good diet. It's not a good diet. And I would be shocked if that has a lot to do with the poor birth rate that's going on among certain people in this country. The Western diet is very poor. And I was talking to a few people, this was a few years back. I said, I don't even believe eating 3 meals a day is correct. They came up with that just a few centuries ago, ladies and gentlemen. I don't really believe that that was something that people did. I think when they came up with that, it just causes people to overeat. That's all it does. But please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell. And I will see you on the next video. Peace, family.